Today, we're honored to have DEA legend Lew Rice, whose decades of service include some of the most daring and high-profile drug investigations in U.S. history. Lew will share first-hand stories of the rise of major drug empires and his encounters with notorious figures like Frank Lucas and Nicky, both of whom gained infamy as major players in the narcotics world and were later depicted in American Gangster. He'll provide an insider's look at the complex and dangerous nature of high-level undercover operations, revealing the risks, tactics, and triumphs involved in combating powerful drug cartels. This episode promises a raw and riveting conversation on the realities of the war on drugs and the men who fought it from within. Gold Shields brings true stories from law enforcement, the military, true crime authors, and first responders. Experience the dedication, danger, and emotional toll with the heroes themselves. These gripping tales of true crimes, true stories, and true heroes are all here on Gold Shields.
Hey, welcome back to Gold Shields. This is Dan Murphy along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith. How are you, buddy?
Great on this nice Friday.
Yeah, we have an amazing guest. I mean, it's another one of those guest time where we have to stop what we're doing to remind ourselves to start recording. That's how interesting this gentleman is and his career, and I just can't wait to dive into it. You know, the United States of America has been engaged in what some people almost mockingly call a war on drugs for probably 50-something years. And we have seen the scourge of what narcotics, most of which has come from other countries, has done to our country. Ruined millions of lives and millions of families and destroyed economies, and yet we still see flows of it coming in. The United States government has one agency dedicated completely and solely towards eradicating the drug problem in this country. That's their mission. And the men and women who do it are among the finest people you'll ever meet in your life in law enforcement. And I had the honor of working in a task force with DEA from 91 to 94 back in my career. And I can tell you it left an impression upon me. We have a guest today who I'll let Tom do a little bit of introduction on, but you're going to get an insight into what it is that really takes place in the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration from a vet, a hero, and somebody we're so honored to have on this morning. Tom, who do we have?
Yeah, Lew Rice is a legend. It's plain and simple. I mean, you mentioned the word DEA, and everyone's first reaction is Lew Rice because of what he did. You can watch movies, you can watch Miami Vice and Scarface and American Gangster and all that, and Lew lived through all that. All that craziness in all those movies and TV shows, Lew was in the middle of. The 70s, the 80s, and 90s at probably the height of drugs, different kinds of drugs, heroin, coke, crack, everything. And we are honored to have Lew here on our show today. And I have to do this because I want them to continue to be friends of ours. Giovanni and Dutch from Inside the Life set this up, who are great friends of all three of ours. And we thank them a lot for
Love those guys.
for being in the middle of this and getting this done. So Lew, welcome to Gold Shields, buddy, and thanks for joining us.
Well, Tom and Dan, thank you for all you do to tell our story in law enforcement. It's a story that needs to be told more and more so people understand the challenges that we're up against and what we are doing to try to protect American citizens. So thank you. I just want to say also, talking about Cop Line, so important because we're asked to do an impossible job dealing with the human condition with people at their lowest level. And it does take a toll. It takes an emotional toll. And in the early years of our organizations, we didn't really have the EAP programs to adequately deal with it for the men and women on the front line. So it presented itself in alcoholism and people getting depressed and despondent. But right now, there is no shame in talking to somebody when you're at your lowest level. So I really compliment you for encouraging the men and women that are taking on this difficult task to call Cop Line. Talk to somebody that understands the challenges that you're going through and can talk you through it so you could see another day.
Very, very well said, Lou. Thank you for pointing that out. It's true. It's universally true, too, around the world even. Um, you started into law enforcement, and we want to hear about how it came to be that you became a DEA agent, and then we want to hear some about the amazing stuff that gets done in that agency and the things that you've seen personally. But first, tell us where you grew up, how this happened.
So I grew up in New York City in the projects in Queens, Woodside houses. My dad was a proud New York City detective. And I'd say proud because at that time, being African American in the 50s, the police were looked at as the enemy and he was looked at as a traitor. But he was proud. And it took me a while to understand that what he was doing was helping others. Because when you really get involved in the neighborhood, nobody wants drug guys selling drugs in their neighborhood because if they sell to their kids or their grandkids, they're going to get addicted and overdose, or they're going to be exposed to the highest level of the criminal penalties. So people really want to live in drug-free communities. So the police play an important role to have that happen. And, I had to talk to my dad, and he was always, Lewis, there's good and bad in all. The media exaggerates sometimes and had the patience of Job. And no matter what was going on, just the calmness about him, just to talk about the issues and whatnot and get different perspectives and never say you're wrong, but just listen as a young kid growing up a teenager. So I adore about that. I looked up to him. It was like and when he and my mom got married, he was they were both 19 years old. But the wisdom they had at 19, when I look at myself at 19, and I look at my kids, they said, Mama mia. I mean, the wisdom they had. He used to give me one of his shoes and my cousin one of his shoes. And he would say, $5, whoever shines at the shoe the best. And it was always a tie, and he always had the best shoes out there. So he was always, it was always a tie, but he had the best pair of shine shoes. Well, so he was always one about being well dressed and well spoken. Uh, and I grew up growing up in the projects. We didn't know we didn't have a lot of money. We would laugh and joke, and my parents separated or whatnot, but my dad would still come and take me and my sister over to my grandmother's house. We'd spend their weekend. We go to Prospect Park, horseback riding or ice skating on Empire Boulevard. It just almost like family stuff. And as we grew up, a lot of my friends we would go out with the girls to the movies, and we snap on each other. I think they call it play the dozens now, and just viciously. If somebody had a big nose, I mean, he never got to live that down. Everybody knew he had a big nose. We just having fun as kids. And we had one routine at every Easter. We'd get dressed up and we'd get on the F train and we'd take it out to Coney Island. It must have taken like an hour and a half to get out there from Queens or whatnot. But that was the Easter tradition to go out to Coney Island. And it would be a bunch of the guys and a bunch of the girls. And what happens now is as we get older, a lot of these guys went into the army in the service. They went to Vietnam. They got addicted to drugs, and they came back wanting to go to parties with the girls, go to Coney Island on Easter, but they wanted to get heroin first. And then one by one, I saw them either overdose and die, or they just lived unfulfilled lives. They were just shells of people, and the look in their face, it was just terrible. And so, and I was at a career day at my alma mater, St. John's University, and the DEA agent came in, and a personal specialist, they call him back then, now it's HR, came in, and they were talking about this new agency, 1973, and DEA. And I said, "Boy, I could identify with that agency because then I'm going to go after the guys that struggle as my friends, you know." And because of the civil rights struggle in the 60s and the 70s, a lot of parents have supported the civil rights leaders of the day, as parents do, not for their benefit, for their kids' benefit. So when they saw their kids, get hooked on drugs and just zombies and unfulfilled lives of overdoses, the parents were destroyed. So there was a lot of despair and a lot of heartbreak in the community because kids you know forever and what they always be here, he overdosed. I think, what? The guy's dead in the maybe 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, you know? So I said, I can identify with this mission. So would never happen now. I graduated in June of 74. I was sworn in as a special agent with DEA in October of 74, several months later. And I was 21 years of age, you know. Uh, I didn't go to agent school until January the following year. So for the 3 months that I was in the office, I was assigned to an enforcement group. So I had no police power. So I would do like, go for stuff for the actual guys and to actually see these guys. I mean, I was it was quite intimidated by saying, boy, how could I mean, these guys seeing me, I could possibly be what they're doing. Because these guys were older, so a lot of them were Vietnam vets. One of the guys with the NYPD that came over and they walked with that swagger. Them, I'm 21 years of age and whatnot, and taking the train, not driving. I said, oh boy, did I get it over my head, you know? But we had some good camaraderie, good supervisors. I would read the case files to understand how these investigations went, how the surveillances go, and the commitment that these guys had. And I said, boy, people are talking on the outside saying that this is a wasted war on drugs. And so they got no idea how hard these people are working to try to stop drugs. I mean, we had a supervisor by a guy by the name of Frank White. He's well known in federal law enforcement. And if anybody writes the book on DEA, he'll get his own chapter. He was a Silver Star medalist in the war in Vietnam. And the more complex the situation was, the more dangerous it was, the more he wanted to get involved and had a good sense of major operations. I mean, he could plot 50 people in the street and know with certainty where everybody was and design operation plans that are designed for success. And I was working with him. I was telling somebody the other day, the most difficult part of the academy was sparring on the rank, that sight alignment, and these instructors from the South, they would laugh. They'd say, "This guy's from New York, and he don't know how to fire a gun." You figure everybody was a gangster in New York. So yeah, from New York, man, but that's fired a gun. So I would have to miss my lunch break to qualify in the rank because they put the pressure and you say, hey, that's the right, you can do well in academics and physical fitness, but you don't qualify on that range, you're not going to be a special agent. A little bit of pressure for a 21-year-old. So I would miss my lunch break and try to qualify extra points. I remember talking to Frank White, legendary supervisor. Everybody was in awe when he walked down the halls. And he said, Lew, when you get back here, if you're ever in a shootout, the guy would be so close you could spit on. Don't even worry about that stuff. I said, okay, a little bit of courage for a 21-year-old. And you're right. I mean, the ratio of what gunfight takes place is extremely close. So it was that kind of camaraderie when I went into the office and sort of dedication of these men and women. I mean, we'd do surveillance on a guy, and he would come in. Frank, he always had not necessarily a suit, but always a jacket, press pair pants, collar shirt, tie. But the day he came in with some Cheetos and no tie, and he called the number 2 in the office and they closed the door, we all knew, the guys in the group, 15 of us, we ain't going home that night. And he would come out and he'd say, okay, this guy made a buy from this guy who lives up in Grand Concourse 2 weeks ago. We're gonna locate him and we're gonna follow him all day. So we drive around where we knew the guy lived, his girlfriend was, and till we found him. And then when we find him, we just follow him all day. Just to get an idea of what his day's like when he's not doing a drug deal with us, and gave us good intel that this guy became the fugitive. We had some other places to look for him and people he was associated. So he was just a top-notch investigator like that, but a hard worker. And when I say you follow him all day, we'd sleep in the cars, you know.
We'd sleep McDonald's to wake up in the next
day. And meanwhile, the shopkeepers, they would be in awe, said, "Oh, we know something hot and heavy going on here because these guys ain't moving from this location." And then they'd close up, we're still there. They'd open up the next morning, we'd still be there ready to go. They'd said, "Hey, you guys all right? You want some coffee? You know, what's going on? Let us know, let us know." But it was just that spirit of accomplishment and team that, hey, these guys are destroying the country. We're going to get them. And when we would meet these guys, the big guys, and sit them down and talk to them in a room, we found that they, for the most part, didn't use drugs. They didn't want people in their organization to use drugs because they knew the dangers of drugs and that people are going to be addicted. And if they're addicted, they're probably going to be more susceptible to cooperate. And they didn't want their kids to use drugs. And they use this as the people that use it are suckers and what, and then they're making money off other people's business.
Now, were you an undercover at the time, or were you doing the investigation?
I did. I was doing a lot of undercover work. It was interesting. I'm 21 years old, 22 a week after I swore in October 29th. And so, the agents that were interviewing me, it was like 3 old-time agents. One was a supervisor, and they were going back and forth, should we or should we not? Because I was 21 and I looked 21, and one guy said, well, his father's a Harlem detective in 2-5, so he knows about law enforcement stories and whatnot. So that's the notch in his favor. And the early guy said, he looks so young, no facial hair, no nothing. Who'd ever make him for a federal narcotic agent, And at that time, you had all the major African-American drug dealers that were ruling the day. Goldsfinger, Nicky Bonds, Frank Lucas, Dyke Matthews, all these legendary guys that the media would write about. They'd go to the garden and all dressed out, they walked the streets and, streets were parked and whatnot. And it was those guys, their connection with the mafia that we were trying to get at the highest level. So, so they saw me as a good asset. So I would go a lot of undercover work, and the thing with the undercover, that's how you made your bones. In every organization, public, private, there's certain things you do to become a core employee. And in DEA in the 70s, it was the undercover work, Frank White was a good storyteller, historian. And he talked about 2 guys we had, Frank DeMillo and Tom DeVide. And Frank DeMillo and Tom DeVide were working together. DeMillo was the undercover agent working on, organized crime cases. And unfortunately, he was killed in a hotel doing a drug deal in Midtown Manhattan. Tom DeVide was its supervisor, who was in the adjoining room in the hotel, and they were supposed to do a drug deal. These guys came in to do a drug ripoff, and when they pulled out the guns and shot DeMillo, the responding agents just came through the side door of the hotel and fired back, and Tom DeVine was paralyzed, so they built a special house for them with, the funds from other organizations and donations. And he died 10 years later as a result of his injuries. And so I heard these, and this was in 1972. I think it was October 12th. And Frank was a good storyteller to always tell the guys about the traditions of people that came before you and the sacrifices. So I was fortunate enough when I was a special agent in charge of the New York office to rename the training room as the Pomelo and Divine Training Room. We had Frank's dad was still alive, his sister. We had Tom Divine's wife and her sons come in. We had our deputy administrator from Washington come in, and we did a nice ceremony. Had all the agents in the training room to see and to witness this, and so they understand the history about they're in the game right now, but there were people before you, and this is the sacrifice that they did, which could happen right now. An undercover investigation in a hotel, jail time is very, very high in narcotics trafficking, a lot of money involved in narcotics trafficking, and you can't, take these guys for granted and whatnot. and carrying guns and firing guns is just a part of the trade. So you have to, try to engage the plan where you reduce the opportunity for danger, but you're never certain. And as you know, we come with our script, and our script is to keep the public safe, keep the defendant safe, and we go home to our families. These guys come in with a different script, and a lot of times they may come in with a script that says, we're going to rip these guys off. Because at the federal level, we're dealing with large amounts of drugs, which have been large amounts of cash. So it's not unusual to have $250,000 splash roll out to show these guys. And these guys are figuring, hey, when they show that money, we're going to take it, So it's always the danger, and you have to keep in your mind. Dan, you were assigned to the task force, and then never forget my first supervisory assignment was in Miami in the 80s, and I had a guy in the group who was a NYPD police officer from the Bronx, and we had a group meeting one day, and he says, Lou, I'm starting to lose my edge, He said, I'm a cop in the Bronx, I'm walking on patrol, I'm alert, I'm watching, something could happen and whatnot. I said, yeah, I can understand it, and it's a greater challenge. I said, because you're in the police station, people in uniform, handcuffs, guns, moving back and forth and whatnot, you're in a high state of alert. You come into this building down in Miami, we were in the Koga Center down there. It's well manicured and whatnot, an office building like in any corporate America. Nobody has uniforms, and prisons are usually brought in around the back and whatnot. So you can get a sense of, it's just another deal. And so that's why you got to present it against that, because every time we hit the street, you got to be operating at peak efficiency, because anything can go wrong. And we used to do a lot of training about that. And it's not just another deal. And you could have been out there in 100 undercover cases, everything went well at the plan. But this 101 case, something is not right. And a good supervisor would tell the undercover guy that, okay? Because, the rest of the guys, they want to get in there, do the arrest and all that other stuff. But if something happens, usually the undercover guy is going to get hurt first. So the good supervisor would take the pressure off the undercover guy's back and say, hey, when you meet this guy today, and you've met him several times over the past 6 or 8 months, conversations, passing money, getting drugs, everything was fine. But you meet him today and just something in your sensing is not right. You can't describe it, but you just got that sense, something a little different. Good supervisor told the guy, get out of there. Get out of there. Okay? Nobody's going to second guess you. You're the guy up front. We're in there to come in afterwards, but it's afterwards. Something has already happened. And so you rely on your instincts to ingratiate yourself with this guy, have him believe you were a drug dealer also, get the drugs, give him the money and whatnot. But this time it's just something a little different. You can't really put your finger on it, but you realize something got to, and that empowered guys to even be bolder, knowing that I'm not going to be a guy that said, well, why'd you cancel a deal? Well, I can't, because there's a certain amount of making your bones that you want to be able to say you convinced this guy that you're somebody you're not. And the funny thing is, when that would happen and these guys would finally get arrested, they would always say, I knew you were a man. I knew you were a man. So, and we would always go back. Yeah, I wasn't mad. So you knew you got to sell me this heroin and whatnot, and you got to go to federal prison, but you just did it anyway because you knew. So we got to laugh back and forth. It was like you didn't trick me. I knew you were a man. I knew you were a man. Why do you keep meeting me and giving me all this heroin?
It's the history of narcotics enforcement, and I'm sure it's the same around the world. In this country, is filled with agents and detectives and cops who can tell you stories the likes of which you're talking about right now, about that tension, about that sixth sense, about you're dealing with unscrupulous people to begin with. You're dealing with people who are heavily motivated by financial gain, and they will kill for it because that's what you have to do. Drugs go together with guns, go together with violence, period. A, B, C. That's how it works. You have to be really, really on top of your game to do this, and you have to have nerves of steel to be an undercover. Now, we have seen in our lifetimes, in our careers, we've seen some devastating things. You mentioned Kiki Camarena before, what happened to him down in Guadalajara. Horrible, horrendous moment. And then we talk about locally in New York. I'm not even talking about NYPD guys and girls that got hurt doing undercover operations on a local basis, but Everett Hatcher, Staten Island. That was a case where it's an experienced agent going out just to have a talk. No drugs, no money, no nothing. And he winds up killed because these people you're dealing with are not legitimate business people. These are unscrupulous people. And anybody can tell you that's ever flashed $250,000, and I've seen it done on guys on my team and stuff. Money becomes a lightning rod. They get singular focus. I want that money. And when they see it, you could walk right next to them in uniform when they're going to get the drugs. They don't even notice you. It's all about the money.
And you know what? The other thing, Lou, you brought up a great point, and it was a conversation we had. We mentioned them before, Giovanni and Dutch, and we've had conversations with other undercovers. So I want to ask you, did you get into a situation where, yeah, I should pull out of this, but I'm not going to because I want this guy, and you just push it to the extreme level of real danger. Like this is going to go one way or another, not in the middle. And they always found it interesting in themselves to go, no, I got this, and then ended up, thankfully being okay. But did you run into those as well? Like, hey, I'm not giving up on this guy.
And it's a great comment and assessment, Tom, because it's part and parcel of being a success. I mean, you do something, you're successful, and the more you do it, the more you get successful. And so you kind of really believe that, with the experience behind you, that you're going to be successful again, and you don't want to put any doubt in that because you have to be confident because these guys got good instincts. And on one hand, you're usually introduced by, the informant, which is somebody they trust and rely on. But these guys have good instincts also, and they know the penalties are real high if you are a law enforcement officer. So you have to be, really cagey when you're talking with these guys. You have to be confident, but you can't be too pushy, and you can't be pushy to the extent where you want this deal to go to want this deal to go. And that's what experienced undercover agents would tell me. Sometimes walk away, Yeah, you want to make this the buy. You want to get your bones, your credibility in the organization, but sometimes these guys will put you in a situation where it's best for you to just, for your own safety, and to put something in his hand that, hey, I'm walking away. I'm walking away. I don't like your terms. I don't like where you're asking me to meet. I'm not going to do it. And a good supervisor, I mentioned Frank White, he would always want us to have that first meeting in a public area, restaurant, bar, a place where you can get black, white, Hispanic, male or female as the surveillance team in and whatnot, not in the guy's house. He said, because if we start out in the guy's house, that from now on till 6 months later, he'll want to do it in his house. Okay. So let's draw him to a public area and realizing that as much as we want to make that sale and get the drugs, he wants the money. Okay. And so we have some bargaining on our side. And don't forget that. And make sure he knows that, hey, he's got to give you something also. And so we would negotiate like that, and try to figure out a way to make sure we were safe, make sure the surveillance thing was safe, the defendant was safe, and so complete the objective of the goal. But sometimes you have to walk in their armor. I remember being down on the Lower East Side. This is in the 70s. It was like heroin capital. And now it's a different place, like in Harlem, we see multi-million-dollar Browns numbers in Bed-Stuy, the Lower East Side. I think you guys rode NYPD 3 in a car that, and I remember getting out of the car with the undercover car with the informant, and we walked up to the apartment, and there was a lookout, of course, right on the steps. He said only one can go out, Okay. And I'm 23, 24 years old, a New Yorker, so I'm thinking I'm Superman or invincible. I sent the informant back to the car. Did we go back to the car? I'm going upstairs.
Now, in hindsight, you know, I have no idea how many people are up in the apartment. I had no idea if I'm going to make it to the apartment. So I'm going to do the hallway, and these guys, they got to jack me, and we got a boxing match and whatnot. But I'm feeling that confidence. I know the team's back there, but it's a walk up, 4 flights walk up, no elevator and whatnot. It's not going to go good. But I went. And talking to Frank later, and he said, "Well, that's why I always like young guys in the group." He said, "I get some guy in here. He's in his 30s. He's got a wife. He's got a couple of kids. Maybe he don't want to go up there, But I got a young guy. He's got no wife. He's got no kids. He's feel invincible. Up we go. Up we go." But we had a lot of camaraderie like that, a tight knit, tight group. And when you're out there, risking your life in an operation, you hopefully it's going to go your way, but you really never know. You bet you never had you. He was, which I knew very well. He was on a meeting. It was no drugs, no money. It's extended and whatnot. And this guy killed him. For auction. But that's the thing that good supervisors, zero in on these things. I mean, Faraci, from the intel that I had just gotten out of prison, right? He had served a murder, killed a black guy, black homosexual, with his hands. He did like 10 years and whatnot. After he's African American. Probably not the right choice to be the undercover with this guy. Okay. And, they meet. The guy that set the whole thing up, we had the intel was from, was an informant in prison. So if he's in prison setting people up on the outside, he definitely set people up in prison, right? And so the intel we're hearing is that sooner or later the word gets into the prison that he sent people out, then they gets outside the prison also. And so the meeting is, is he an informant or is he the cop? If he's an informant, he'd be by himself. If he's a cop, he's going to have surveillance. And, he had him showcase him, how to meet him at certain sections. But one that we believed he was showcasing that people at these locations, seeing if there was a tail following him. And as happens sometimes, unfortunately, the surveillance team lost it, So he doesn't see a tail,
So you had that was a tragic case, but just to shift for a second, if you don't mind, you had a front row seat to the days of Leroy Nicky Barnes and Frank Lucas and the stranglehold they had on Harlem and the drug market. Tell us a little bit about your experiences with the two of them.
So those were the big guys. So it's funny too, because when you get the big guy, it's like the big name now is Gotti. Everybody had a piece of the Gotti case. So I'm clear to tell you, had nothing to do with Frank Lucas getting arrested or Nicky Barnes getting arrested. But those were the names that were buzzing in the 70s and whatnot. And these guys, especially Nicky Barnes, did a lot to distance himself from ever meeting anybody he didn't know. And so even the two agents that received the Attorney General's Award for undercover work in the Nicky Barnes case from DEA never met Nicky. They met people in his organization that co-signed that the drugs they were buying was from Nicky, but they never met Nicky. So he knew how to distance himself from that. But even with that, with the federal conspiracy law, the government was able to prove that he was the leader of the organization. And Bob Fisk, who was the U.S. attorney, was one of the prosecutors that prosecuted Nicky Barnes, and said, "You're not going to see the CEO, General Motors, on the assembly line." So these guys are agents are buying from his workers. You're not going to see the CEO there with them, but we know there's an organization, and this guy's a top because we had all these accomplished witnesses. And when you mentioned the Nicky Barnes case, that was the first anonymous jury in the federal system. Most people assume that the anonymous juries came in because of the mafia. First anonymous during the federal system was Nicky Barnes' days. And why? These guys are killing all the witnesses. I mean, if you read some of the newspaper clippings back then, it was just amazing. Everybody went to trial back then because the Organized Crime Control Bill was not in effect. So if you had a good lawyer and whatnot, he could probably get you out. There were no minimum mandatories. And I spent so much time in court because everybody went to trial, And then when the Organized Crime Control Bill came in, you had minimum mandatories. Hardly anybody wanted to go to trial because they realized that the DEA cases, the time you get arrested, the case has been going on for 6, 8, 9 months. There's no we see some observations, lock them up. No. The guy you could see, the guy that's out there, he's easy. We want to tighten him up, but we want to find out who he's getting the stuff from. Okay, so that's the goal. And so we would pursue these cases like that. So at least 6 months, and once these guys would sit down with the minimum mandatories, they would realize that there's nothing a good lawyer can do because they're in an exposure of a minimum of 10 years. And on the federal time, you're going to do 85, 90% of that 10 years. And so the only way out is if you cooperate or you can prove you have some mental incapacity. And you know how that goes. I mean, you'll get a psychiatrist say the guy's crazy. The government's going to bring in the votes. Some parents that say, he's fine, ready to go to trial. And so that's how they broke up the mob. You got mob bosses, mastermind. It was unheard of back in the 70s. Unheard of,
So let me ask you this.
Also.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, now they have podcasts also.
Yeah, right.
Hey, wait a minute. We have a podcast too.
No.
When it comes to the safety of law enforcement, first responders, and military personnel, every moment counts, especially in the dark. Streamlight provides the reliable, high-performance lighting solutions that these heroes trust in the most dangerous situations, whether it's a car stop, navigating dark alleyways, or exploring abandoned buildings. With Streamlight by their side, our heroes can tackle challenges with confidence, knowing they have the power of advanced lighting technology to guide them. From the first responders on the front lines to the law enforcement officers ensuring our safety, Streamlight is there to make every mission a little easier and much safer. Join us in supporting those who protect us. Visit Streamlight.com to discover how you can be part of the team keeping our heroes safe. Because when they shine, we all shine.
Looking for powerful defense without the mess? Meet Impact, a revolutionary line of chemical irritants designed for law enforcement, military, and personal protection. With no blowback, no cross-contamination, and easy cleanup, Carry Impact delivers unmatched stopping power without the hassle. Whether you're in the field or on the street, safety should never be compromised. Protect yourself with the next generation of defense. Carry Impact, stopping power, redefined.
A real interesting question that came into my mind. You have Nicky Barnes and you have Frank Lucas, who are running everything in that area at the time. In today's world, your competition gets taken out in no time. How was the relationship between Nicky and Frank, and how did they coexist with what was going on at the time?
Yeah, they were competitors, operating in the same space, and they were able to coexist. I mean, like New York is a big place, but it's a small place, and so each one had their own crowd, each one had their own organization, but there were so many heroin addicts in New York City. I mean, if you look at the file footage, I remember going up there in the fall, winter time. The buildings were burned out. The city was giving the buildings away for $1. And they'd have those large steel drum cans there with wood and fire in it, and people hovering around getting warm. It was like the night of the living dead. The abscesses on the arm and whatnot. But that was that whole area now,
and we would go out there, you know. I mean, that's where we spent our time, you know. And I will tell you though, is, you know, we didn't have police cars, but if somebody's getting locked up and they get into side a brand new Cadillac, yellow Cadillac, and one of the cars we had, that's a police car. You know, you may not see it as such, but people in the neighborhood know, hey, Joe Blow got locked up and they put him in that yellow caddy or whatnot. So you might as well have a sucked out that it says NYPD. So when we would come up there in the cars, you would see black women in the window doing this. Okay, they couldn't come down and say thank you, but they were happy because they wanted the kids to live successful lives. They couldn't come down there and say that, but they knew by those cars, even though they was no stamp on it, they knew what was going to happen. And then now my kids got a chance to go to school without somebody pushing them to sell drugs or enticing them to use drugs and graduate and be successful.
That's one of the real the tragedy of drugs is not that the drug dealers shoot and kill each other and go to prison. The tragedy is the unintended targets, so to speak, the victims in the neighborhoods, like you just said, the kids that can't walk down the street without stepping on the crack vials or the used works, the mothers that worry about their kids all day long because they're out in that world. They have to walk through it to go to school. They have to play on those streets where all this stuff is going on. That's what drugs brings with it, the total degradation and total breakdown of society, right?
And for every generation, it's always going to be a drug of choice. You know, when I was started in the '70s, it was heroin, and cocaine was out there, but we weren't making any cocaine investigations. If we had information on somebody selling cocaine, it was going to be a knockoff. Okay, and why? Because back in the '70s, you know, was a lot of street crime. You know, and addicts that, you know, they had a Jones now, they had the, well, you know, knocking grandma down, taking a pocketbook to get a fix and whatnot. The cars had no radios in it. If people breaking the cars, taking the radios out. And so the whole focus, the media and the politicians and the citizens was, we got to get rid of all these addicts. So the concentration was on heroin days. And we would get information about cartels with cocaine, but we wouldn't do an investigation. We'd set it up for a meet, show a flash roll or whatever, and have them bring a kilo, a couple of kilos, and then lock them up. And then, you know, when the heroin thing started to die down, and, you know, we were at the large scale now cocaine, you know, using the same transportation routes. And then you get into, you know, the crack cocaine, which just devastated the whole country, and whatnot, and you know, ecstasy, and, you know, prescription drugs now, and the fentanyl, and so it seemed like every generation it's going to be a choice. Should I not? And that's why the prevention piece, the education piece, is so important, because I'm a firm believer if you know better, you do better. You know, and we spent a lot of time in Harlem going to the schools, talking to the kids about making good decisions. Because a lot of these kids were good kids. And I remember the principal that wanted us to come up there in, like, it was May and school was going to be out the next month, but she wanted to see all the students back in September, you know, to just tell the kids about making good decisions. That if somebody comes to you and you live in a neighborhood where you know people are selling drugs, don't tell, you know, you're not into that. You know, don't even refer them to somebody else. Because if you refer them to somebody else, you know, then you could be part of the conspiracy, you know. And the
Right,
kids said,
that too.
oh, I said, yeah, I said, it's considered aiding and abetting. And, oh, that's not fair, you know. It's, yeah, you live in a neighborhood, you know, such and such. And you tell them, well, no, I don't have them, but go to such and such. I said, do you realize you can get charged for every sale they do with son? Oh, that's not fair. I said, I got that, but realize that you don't know nothing. You know, you don't know nothing. I said, because that's going to be, you go to trial, it's going to be a jury question. But I said, then the guy is going to sweeten it up, go back and give you a couple $100. And you're saying to yourself, I made a couple $100. I'm not selling drugs only because I live here and I know everybody. So you're now motivated to refer to everybody. And I said, all those deals that go, that's what we charge to you. I said, that's not that. I said, but that's the law. So anybody asks you about something illegal, you don't know nothing. You don't know nothing. Don't talk to us. Yeah.
And you know what? Just so everyone's out there, because this is my next question to you. The movie American Gangster is about Frank Lucas, and Nicky Barnes plays a part in it, but it's more Frank. Uh, so everyone out there, we're throwing these names around. You may not know what it is. Watch American Gangster. It is an incredible movie. Denzel Washington uh, really lays out what that time frame was like and what was going on at that time, and the inside story of Frank Lucas's whole organization. And you had an opportunity to sit with him at a point in time. And what I found most interesting, this is what I want to get to, you described it as being a great educational experience. And that's what I want to hear. You know, he's the guy at that time, and you sit down, you get an education from him. Tell us about that.
It was like getting a PhD in narcotics running. Because here's a guy whose name is out there. Frank Lucas, running hollow. And, when the police department came over, they had a bunch of cases, deliveries of Manite and quinine. This is NYPD, I think it was Manhattan North Narcotics. And Manite and quinine are used to cut heroin. You get the heroin, you add some Manite and quinine to it, you have a larger package, you can make more money. I think Manite's a baby laxative, and the quinine is used to treat malaria. And so they had it's really an international case. They had a confidence guy who got arrested for confidence dealing, and he agreed to cooperate. And the case file in the Eastern District was Lieberman, because the guy had a hardware store on the Lower East Side. I remember this, I don't know how, but 171 Avenue A. And he would get the Manite quinine from his contacts in Canada. So they drive it down from Canada to the Lower East Side, large amounts, hundreds and hundreds of pounds of Manite quinine, store it in the hardware store on the low down in Delancey Street. And he would deliver it to these hollow drug bits, the confidence man. And the Manhattan South guys, North guys would ask him, when we deliver this stuff, ask them what they're going to do with all this Manite and quinine. And so these guys were sophisticated, heroin dealers, been in the game for a while. They just shut him down. Say, hey, I'm worried about just give us this buck and here's the money, But the Manhattan North guys, they knew, because all these guys, they had them fully identified. They knew the businesses that they owned. They were, all a drug dealer, legends in their own. So they brought it over to the Eastern District of New York. And at that time, DEA had a group of senior agents in the Eastern District and a group of senior agents in the Southern District. And they came to the Eastern District and they said, we know these guys. We know they're connected with the mafia, with the exchange of heroin and somebody into the community. And we noted the source in Canada, we know the guy who owns the hardware store. All those guys that we locked up, the source in Canada, the guy who owned the hardware store. But they had no state statute to prosecute against Manite and quinine. They'd spent a lot of time. They had photographs and all this other stuff. So we brought it over to the feds, and we had a pretty aggressive prosecutor who was at that time just starting to try these multi-defendant, I'm talking about 10, 15 defendant cartel cases. You could see the rollable courtroom with 10 defendants, translators and whatnot. Some people following the transcript, what's going on. These are the complex cases. So they brought it over to him, and he says, something, I'm glad you guys brought this. He says, I could charge these guys. So we're going to bite these guys for federal distribution of heroin. And the theory of the government's case is going to be, number one, they've all been previously convicted of heroin distribution. Okay. Number two, Manite and quinine are the essential ingredients to cut heroin. And number three, they're paying 10 times the normal amount the man I'd want. So technically, he was a narcotics prosecutor, federal narcotics prosecutor. He said, I'm comfortable indicting him. Okay. He said, but I do know that this is New York City. Okay. And the conversation is going to be, where's the beef? You know, where you have no heroin, you have no money, all you have is man in the corner, which is not a state park. And so I did some research in DEA, and unbeknownst to most people in the agency, Frank Lucas was cooperating. He was at a federal prison that housed cooperatives. At that time, there were 3 in the U.S. One was in New York City, one was in San Diego, I think the other one was in Chicago. He was in the one in San Diego. So prosecutor and I flew out there to San Diego. We sat with him in the prison. We went over the defendants in the case. He knew them all, had did heroin business with them all, had did quinine business with them all, and he was ready to testify, and they've already been tested. Now, this was a little controversial in the office because when Frank was arrested, he claimed that the agent stole his money. I think when they did the arrest at his house in Phoenix, New Jersey, his wife threw a duffel bag out the window. The agent sees a duffel bag, and let's say there were $300,000 more bills to the duffel bag. He claimed it was $500,000. So what people don't, the public probably doesn't understand is now all those agents, cops that were out there, the spotlight is on that. So that means promotions are delayed, okay, special assignments are delayed, and they always have that air of suspicion around them because the guy made an allegation. So people think that law enforcement, they protect their own, and oh no, these guys are isolated, okay? So nothing's happened to them, and you find out who your friends are, just on an allegation. So he made that allegation, their careers get frozen, and then the allegation turns out to be BS because during that time there was a lot of stuff going on, with drugs and corruption and all of that other stuff. So the bosses in New York knew that, and when they heard that a lot of money was out there, the top guys in New York drove out to Teaneck, New Jersey, and they told these guys, there's about 10 to 12 of them, stand single file, and I want you to search the guy in front of you. Now these guys were like, "Hey, what do you?" And it's time out. We're trying to protect you. Okay, there's going to be an allegation, and we're going to be able to mitigate that tell you what we did on this week. And so they did it, and so they were found, they were vindicated, but it takes a while, right? And so a lot of sore feelings. So when the old time guys found out that Frank was cooperating, and I was going to use it in the case, everybody wasn't always happy about that. This guy put a lot of heat on a lot of guys, with this. But we were finally able to get over that because, I mean, he's the only guy that could really, point these guys out and tell the stories. And we did everything we could to make sure that he wasn't embellishing and whatnot by telling them, hey, these guys know you, and they're going to throw stuff against you. If we find out that you're lying, then everything you've done before is over. And he was facing 70 years, 40 years from the feds in New York, 30 years from the state of New Jersey to work consecutively. That means he had to do this 70 years. And then he was facing a murder charge in special narcotics. So we let him know that, hey, you're only going to hurt yourself if you embellish and whatnot, everything you've done. And by that time, he had given up a lot of people. I mean, most guys that you arrest will tell you, hey, let me out, I'll give you everybody. I mean, he could do this from jail. I mean, he could call somebody, hey, meet such and such tonight at 8 o'clock in front of smallest paradise on the hall and give him 2 keys. And the guy would be there, give him 2 keys. And then the guy would get arrested and he'd, hey, I'm not guilty, not guilty. But then when they found out Frank was the witness, it said, well, all these guys pled guilty. So up until that time, he'd given a lot of people and never had to testify because they all pled guilty. But the case that we had was a conspiracy case, so we actually needed him to rip all these guys. So it was going to be the first time that he was in court. So we'd bring him in on the weekend, have him sit in the jury box, explain to him how he should answer the questions, where the jury's going to be, where the judge is going to be, to try to prepare it. And knowing that he was at the top of his game, that I'm sitting with a guy, and I'm just getting into the narcotics field about 5 years ago, but I got the guy who's a legend there, so I'm learning how this thing goes. I mean, he got put into the game in the heroin game through Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy Johnson's considered the first African American gangster that was up in Harlem. We have a series about him with Godfather Harlem with Forrest Winter. I think it's coming on a new episode this year and whatnot. So that was his link, And when Frank was on trial, I mean, on his side of the courtroom was Joe Louis, legendary boxer, all these famous legends and entertainers and whatnot. Because if you met Frank, you couldn't help but like it. He had a big, strong guy, personality, but if you sat down and talked to him, he can crack a joke or real fun. But you like the guy, but a cold-blooded killer, cold-blooded killer, cold-blooded too. No qualms, ice ran through his veins. Just a cold-blooded killer. But sitting down with him, you'd like it. So it was me getting an education in my craft. I'm a federal narcotic agent, and I'm sitting right with the guy that everybody knows his name in the country, and because he got locked up because of notoriety of his dealings in Harlem and going to Madison Square Garden with a coat and hat on, fur coat and fur hat on. I'm sitting with him and learning about this gang and learning about criminal facilitation at the chemical bank. He was using the old chemical bank to launder money back then, and just getting a better sense about how these things go. But everything's got to go back to Manhattan North because they had no heroin, but they knew these guys couldn't sell this stuff without Manhattan Inquiry. So they made the investment for over a year to follow these guys, to have the pictures, have the photographs, to understand what they were doing, And the lead defendant, woman lead defendant, was in Englewood, New Jersey. Had a Rolls Royce. All these guys drove around the Rolls Royce. And they all seem to have, the guys at the top of the game, mafia guys, everything, $1,000 in their pocket. Now, $1,000 in 1978 is probably like $10,000 now. But they always had this in their pocket. There's walking around cash money. It's just amazing. Yeah.
You paint a very vivid picture that is it's almost impossible to believe. We see it in the movies, but this is the type of stuff that happens and is happening in different levels all around our country, all around the world when it comes to the drug trade. And as a member of the DEA, you got a chance to be embedded in that world and see what it was really like and sit down. What an amazing experience that must have been to just take in, listen to the brain dump of a guy who managed to build it like that. And it's foreign to most people, but as a member of the DEA, you get to be on the front line of this war. It's still a war. People make fun of that term, but we cannot let drugs completely destroy our society. Now, based upon your career, an amazing career you've had fighting drugs, fighting the scourge of it, all the ills that come from it, what would you say to a young person right now who was thinking about jumping into the DEA as a career?
I'd say go for it. Go for it. Great organization, great people, difficult mission, but a vital mission. But the camaraderie and spirit, that you're part of a great team. You're part of a great team, and especially if you get the opportunity to work in New York.
You know, a lot of people from around the country don't go. They all expect it. But if you like criminal justice and law enforcement and going after the bad guys, what better place venue than New York City? And you will learn them. I tell people when they come to the academy, 6 months from now, when you talk to your peers that are in Chicago or Texas, Houston, or Miami, big cities, Chicago, but you'll be light years ahead on the type of investigations you've been involved. You know, it's just amazing spirit. The spirit between the task force, the oldest task force in DEA, established in 1970. The NYPD sells sends the best protectors over there. You got the DEA agents, you got the state troopers, all working together to focus against these guys. Just unbelievable camaraderie. I remember when I was the ASOC in Philadelphia, and we get the Philadelphia Inquirer, USA Today, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all those papers. I could read all those papers. I didn't read every single article, but I could read those papers and stay on top of all the cases, right? And then I got promoted to run the task force in New York. We get those same papers, not the Philadelphia, but the USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, the News, and the Post. I had to take them under my arm, take them home, and then read them. I was always a day behind. The level of investigations. I mean, people had no idea. You mentioned the DETF, the task force. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, we shut down the division in Philadelphia because we had a delivery of 100 kilos of cocaine, went into a warehouse, audio, video, shut the whole division down for about a month. And it came eventually, after a month, it came. Two guys come in, one nice sports jacket, pair of pants. Other guy comes in, nice jogging suit. You can watch this on the video. They get inside the warehouse, take off their clothes, put on some overalls, and they're stacking the stuff up. And it was driven up to New York right during the marathon. With sodium hydroxide, but had the cocaine inside of it in the early 90s and what. We shut the division down to monitor that case. In New York, that would just be another case. That would be Monday, and Tuesday is $10 million. And none of this stuff ever makes the newspapers and whatnot or the press. So the press has really no idea. But that's why it's good to reinforce these guys that, hey, keep your eye on the ball. You may not get the accolades, but we need you. We need you. The level of activity, the challenges that they're up against, the danger. I said this country is well served that we still have men and women that raise their hand to go, because they can make a whole lot of money in the private sector, more money in the private sector, less danger and less stress.
Amazing. I mean, listen, the legends and people we get to meet on this show are endless. And we're fortunate every day when we talk about past shows and future shows of who we are able to have on and provide their careers to our audience and the experience that you've had to pass on to people looking into getting into this profession. And we just did that for an hour with a legend, Lew Rice. Lew, this was an honor. And you want to talk about an education? This was an education. When Dan and I, you think you know about narcotics, you think you know about drugs until you talk to you and you're like, oh, yeah, I don't know a damn thing. But
Yeah,
this was a pleasure.
I could
It
sit
really
with you
was.
for 12 hours and just listen to you tell me about some of your experiences. And I was in that world briefly, but not like you were. Wow. I mean, to our listeners out there, you have an opportunity. If you've been listening this far, it's because you are like us. You're mesmerized by what it's like to listen to a man like Lew Rice talk about his career, what he's seen, and what happens around us every day. And sometimes you don't even see it, to protect you against the dangers and the evils of the nasty drug world. And it's a nasty world. So we cannot thank you enough.
Nah, Dan, Tom, I appreciate the compliments, but I will tell you, I consider myself fortunate to work with a great team. I mean, I started in New York City. That's where I was born and raised, walking the concrete. So the dynamics of the city, left and went to Kingston, Jamaica, and got promoted in Miami in the 80s. Went to Washington, D.C., our headquarters, then to Philadelphia, then to New York. They were in the task force and the special agent in charge in Detroit, and then ended up my career as a special agent in charge in New York City. In Detroit, we would cover the states of Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky, but ended my career in New York, working with some great men and women. And I spent the day in New York yesterday morning, with T.P. Camarena Jr., who's a federal judge, to tell the story about the day he found out that his dad was kidnapped, tortured, and executed in Guadalajara, Mexico. And he's just a great storyteller. And this happened when he was 11 years old. You listen to a recording of his mom talking to President Reagan, and President Reagan assuring her that, hey, your husband was a hero. America will always remember him, and we're going to do everything we can to get the people responsible for this. And that's why they created Red Ribbon Week in his honor. These are the stories that, to me, shame on us, and talking about us as a country, we need to push this out to that next generation. I can tell you, me included, a lot of old timers in that audience, tears coming down their eyes. People were, well, we weren't doing that, but tears were coming down their eyes. Because the son, Kiki Jr., this is a great storyteller, and told how this impacted his life. And his dad was a Marine, Mexican American, and he talks about the picture of his dad. You see, what is very serious. He said, as a son, I know they told my dad to look serious in the camera to take the ID photo. He said, because every picture I had of my dad, every time he was always laughing and joking. He was the life of the party. He says, so as a son, I smile when I see that picture. I said, I know they told my dad, hey, when you take this picture, I will serious, don't call your face on it. But these are just incredible. I was just fortunate to be with these guys. Impossible task. You have people say, hey, you can't do anything about drugs. Hey, it's still out there, yeah, but it would be a lot worse if we didn't do anything about it, You want to give these kids the opportunities to handle major decisions. You don't want them drugged up, handle these major decisions. So I say hats on to the men and women in the front line. Whatever I can do to support them, I'm always going to be there.
Thank you. It's been an excellent discussion with you, Lew. We can't thank you enough. We look forward to talking to you again. We want to stay in touch with you. Not to mention the fact that I grew up on 38th Street and Greenpoint Avenue, not too far from you in the Woodside houses over on Northern Boulevard. I know where you were.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Same neck of the woods.
Yes, indeed.
Tom, another amazing guest, incredible. And I guess you wrap it up for us because I don't even know what else to say. This man is amazing, and I can't wait to meet up with you in person, break bread, and talk with you because it'd be fascinating.
Yeah, we need to do that. And it's a special thing when you retire that you're still part of that community, because everybody can't go back, but you're just part of that community. I worked with a guy who was a former detective in the DETF, and he said, Lew, the good guys always find a good death. I said, you're right.
Very much.
Good guys always find a good death.
And we will get together. We will make that happen. Listen, it's an honor to have someone like Lew here to tell these stories, because these stories need to get out there, that this job is not easy. It's difficult, both mentally and physically. We talk about it all the time. And that's why we end the show this way, with making sure everyone out there says a prayer for our law enforcement officers and our undercovers, federal, state, local, whoever it is, because all of them are doing a job that they don't get paid a lot of money for. They don't look for medals. They don't look for news headlines. They just do it because they love this job. And keep them in your prayers, as well as their families, because their families go through it as well, on top of our military vets, because it's the same boat. Different mission, but same boat. Pray for them all the time. Please do that. For my partner, Dan Murphy, for an absolute legend and great conversation with Lew Rice, this is Tom Smith. Have a great day, everyone. Please stay safe. We'll see everybody soon.